Since the dawn of humanity, extraordinary figures have emerged, defying comprehension and shaping the course of history. Names like Moses, with his unwavering leadership and the parting of the Red Sea, or Samson, with his superhuman strength capable of bringing down temples, echo through the centuries as symbols of power and divine intervention. However, the figure of Jesus Christ stands out in a singular way, not only for his teachings and miracles, but for the very nature of his existence, which blends the human and the divine in such an intrinsic way that his anatomy becomes a field of study for unraveling the mysteries of life and faith. In this video, you will enter into a deep, investigative journey, an exploration of the anatomy of Jesus Christ, not only from a biological perspective, but also in its spiritual, historical, and supernatural dimension. What really constituted the body that walked on water, healed the sick, resisted crucifixion, and finally resurrected? How can science, history, and theology intertwine to offer us a richer understanding of the man who divided time and redefined human existence? Prepare yourself for an analysis that challenges prejudices and invites reflection, unveiling the secrets of physical resistance, mental capacities, and the miracles of Jesus Christ, blending science, history, and theological interpretation. We will delve into every aspect, from the physical constitution of a first-century Middle Eastern man, forged by a life of work and walking, to the manifestation of powers that transcend human comprehension, culminating in the hypostatic union that defines him as God and man. This is an opportunity to contemplate the greatness of Jesus under a new light, exploring the evidence and interpretations that seek to unravel the complexity of his existence. We invite you to embark on this deep analysis, which promises to enrich your vision of the most influential figure in human history, revealing the intricate tapestry of his physical and spiritual existence. Understanding the anatomy and biological basis of Jesus Christ requires a deep immersion into the historical and geographical context in which he lived. Far from the Eurocentric image frequently portrayed, Jesus, as a first-century Middle Eastern Jew, possessed physical characteristics consistent with his ethnicity and environment. Historians and forensic facial reconstruction specialists suggest that he probably had brown skin, dark and short hair, and an average height of about 160 mm, 5'3", with a weight slightly above 50 kilograms, 110 lbs, similar to the region's inhabitants at the time. This physiognomy, shaped by a life under the intense desert sun, already indicates a constitution adapted to the rigorous conditions of his time, a genetic and environmental heritage that prepared him for the demands of his existence. Life in an agrarian and pre-industrial society, where dependence on physical strength for work and transportation was the norm, would have naturally developed a robust and resistant body from childhood. His lifestyle, far from being sedentary, was marked by extreme physical demands. The Gospels record long walks, often over rugged terrain, between cities and villages of Galilee and Judea. It is estimated that Jesus traveled thousands of kilometers on foot during his ministry, which would require notable physical conditioning and exceptional muscular and cardiovascular resistance. These journeys were not mere displacements, but an integral part of his ministry, requiring vigor to preach, teach, and interact with the crowds under the scorching sun or in adverse weather conditions. In addition to walking, life in the first century involved manual labor and daily activities that required strength and vigor. As a carpenter, Jesus was probably accustomed to physical exertion, carrying and shaping wood, which would have developed a robust and functional musculature, with broad shoulders and strong arms, essential for manipulating rudimentary tools and heavy materials. This routine of arduous work, combined with periods of prolonged fasting such as the 40 days in the desert, demonstrates a capacity for self-sustenance and physiological resilience that transcends the ordinary. His body, therefore, was not just a receptacle for the divine, but a biological machine finely tuned to withstand privations and intense efforts, a true masterpiece of adaptation and strength. The natural resistance of Jesus' body to diseases and adversities is another crucial point. Although the Bible does not detail diseases that Jesus contracted, it emphasizes his ability to heal others, suggesting impeccable health. In a period when medicine was rudimentary and sanitary conditions precarious, The absence of records of illnesses in Jesus can be interpreted as a testimony to his superior physical constitution, perhaps aided by a simple and natural diet based on bread, fish, olive oil, fruits, vegetables, and wine common in the region. This diet, rich in nutrients and fiber, would have contributed to a strong immune system and a vitality that distinguished him, allowing him to remain active and healthy in an environment prone to infections and epidemics. The relevant anatomical aspects for understanding how he endured such extreme physical demands include not only muscular strength and cardiovascular resistance, but also the body's capacity for recovery and pain tolerance elements that would be tested in unimaginable ways during the events that culminated in his crucifixion. The complexity of his biology, therefore, cannot be dissociated from his mission and his unique nature, which blended the human and the divine inseparably, allowing him to experience the fullness of the human condition without being subjugated by its inherent frailties. The ability to endure physical and emotional pain, to recover from exhaustion, and to maintain physical and mental integrity under torture, as evidenced in his passion, suggests a resilience that goes beyond the merely human, pointing to a constitution that was, at the same time, perfectly human and divinely sustained. This duality is what makes the anatomy of Jesus such a fascinating and complex field of study, where each physical aspect intertwines with his messianic identity. The extraordinary powers and abilities attributed to Jesus Christ are at the core of his uniqueness, defying natural laws and human understanding. The healing of diseases, the multiplication of food control over nature, and the resurrection of the dead are examples of miracles that punctuate his trajectory, each laden with theological significance and at times attempts at interpretation from a scientific perspective. Modern medicine, for example, seeks to understand the mechanisms behind instantaneous cures, while psychology explores the power of faith and suggestion in the remission of illnesses. However, the magnitude and consistency of Jesus' miracles often transcend these explanations, pointing to a dimension that goes beyond the purely biological or psychological. The ability to restore the health of individuals with incurable illnesses, such as leprosy or paralysis, without the use of known medications or medical procedures, raises questions about the interaction between mind, body, and spirit. Were these events manifestations of a profound knowledge about human physiology and the capacity for self-regeneration, or direct interventions of a superior force that suspends natural laws? The fusion between biology and transcendence is a recurring theme when analyzing miracles. The multiplication of loaves and fishes, for example, although it may be seen by some as an act of sharing that inspired generosity, is described in the Gospels as a creation ex nihilo, a manifestation of divine power over matter. Similarly, the ability to calm storms or walk on water suggests a mastery over natural elements that defies any known physical explanation. The resurrection of Lazarus, and most notably Jesus' own resurrection, are events that directly confront biology and the inevitability of death, presenting themselves as the maximum expression of his divine nature and his power over life and death. The analysis of these miracles forces us to consider the possibility that reality is not limited to what is observable and measurable by science, but that there exists a transcendent dimension capable of intervening and redefining the laws of the universe. The complexity of such events defies simple categorization, requiring an approach that integrates both the scientific and theological perspectives for a more complete understanding. The impact of these abilities on contemporary and historical perception is immense. For his followers, the miracles were irrefutable proof of his divinity and the arrival of the kingdom of God, solidifying their faith and inspiring the spread of his message. For skeptics, they were enigmas to be unraveled or symbolic narratives, but even for them, the persistence and influence of these stories over millennia are undeniable. Regardless of interpretation, the miracles of Jesus shaped the faith of billions of people over the centuries, establishing him as a central figure in human history. They not only demonstrated his power, but also his compassion and his purpose to redeem humanity, becoming pillars of Christian doctrine and a source of inspiration for countless works of art, literature, and theological thought. The analysis of these extraordinary feats, therefore, is not restricted to mere cataloging. but delves into understanding how the divine manifested itself in the human, leaving a legacy that continues to reverberate to the present day, provoking debates and reflections on the limits of science and the nature of faith. The mental and strategic capacities of Jesus are as remarkable as his physical and supernatural feats, revealing a mind that operated at a level of depth and complexity rarely seen. His intelligence, leadership, and communication ability are evident in every parable, sermon, and interaction recorded in the Gospels. Jesus possessed keen insight, capable of discerning the intentions of hearts and responding with wisdom to captious questions, disarming his opponents with irrefutable logic and spiritual depth. He demonstrated impressive rhetorical mastery, using analogies and examples from daily life to illustrate complex spiritual truths, making them accessible to all, from the simplest fishermen to the most erudite Pharisees. His ability to convey complex teachings in a clear and effective manner, using metaphors and stories accessible to the people, demonstrates exceptional pedagogical mastery. He not only taught, but inspired, mobilized, and transformed lives with his words, establishing a model of charismatic and servant leadership that transcended cultural and temporal barriers. His influence over multitudes and the formation of a group of loyal disciples are testimonies to his power of persuasion and his strategic vision. Jesus was a leader who did not impose his authority by force but through truth and love, attracting followers from all social strata, from the marginalized to the rich and powerful. He demonstrated a remarkable ability to maintain calm and control in situations of extreme risk, from confrontations with religious and political authorities to moments of intense pressure and personal suffering, such as Judas's betrayal and Peter's denial. His serenity in the face of adversity, his mental resilience, and his unwavering faith in his purpose are characteristics that distinguish him as a master strategist capable of navigating complex social and political scenarios without losing focus on his divine mission. The mind of Jesus, therefore, was a beacon of wisdom, discernment, and inner strength, crucial elements for the execution of his ministry and for the lasting legacy he left for humanity. His ability to foresee future events, such as his own death and resurrection, and to strategically plan the dissemination of his message through his disciples, reveals an intelligence that operated on multiple levels, integrating human knowledge with divine wisdom. This combination of sharp intellect, inspiring leadership, and strategic vision is one of the pillars that sustain the permanence of his influence. The extraordinary feats of Jesus Christ are the most tangible manifestation of his singular nature, combining the human and the divine in an unparalleled way. The miraculous healings, which ranged from restoring sight to the blind, from birth to the resurrection of the dead, demonstrate a power over biology and life that transcends any medical explanation. Jesus' ability to instantly heal chronic and terminal diseases, such as leprosy, paralysis, and blindness, without the use of known medications or procedures, defies the laws of physiology and pathology. These miracles were not just acts of compassion, but unequivocal demonstrations of his authority over disease and death. The multiplication of loaves and fishes, the transformation of water into wine, and the ability to walk on water are examples of his mastery over matter and the laws of physics, defying logic and human understanding. These events were not mere tricks, but demonstrations of a divine authority that operated in the physical world, altering material reality in ways that science still struggles to comprehend. His resistance to crucifixion and overcoming extreme physical adversities are, perhaps, the most emblematic feats of his anatomy and resilience. The brutal scourging, which lacerated the flesh and exposed bones and organs, the crown of thorns, which pierced the scalp and caused hemorrhages, the exhausting walk with the cross, under the weight of the wood and public humiliation, and, finally, the crucifixion itself, represent a level of physical suffering that few human beings could endure. Death on the cross was one of the cruelest and most painful forms of execution, designed to prolong agony and humiliation, leading to asphyxiation, hypovolemic shock, and multiple organ failure. However, Jesus endured all of this with a dignity and inner strength that astounds. His ability to forgive his executioners while nailed to the cross, and his voluntary surrender of life, are testimonies to a spiritual strength that manifested through a human body. The resurrection, 3 days after his death, is the apex of his extraordinary feats, an event that not only defies death, but redefines existence itself, offering hope and eternal life to those who believe. Compared to historical figures who demonstrated great courage or resistance, Jesus stands out for transcending the limits of the human, presenting a capacity that can only be attributed to his divine nature, a perfect fusion of human vulnerability and transcendent power. This resurrection was not a reanimation, but a glorious transformation, where his physical body was elevated to a new state of existence, immune to corruption and death, a final testimony to his victory over the limitations of flesh and time. The union between the humanity and divinity of Jesus Christ is the central mystery of the Christian faith, known as the hypostatic union. This doctrine affirms that Jesus is a single person with two complete and distinct natures, 100% God and 100% man. His divinity does not diminish his humanity, nor does his humanity compromise his divinity. He is not a mixture of the two, but the perfect coexistence of both in one person. This duality is fundamental to understanding his anatomy, resistance, and feats. As God, he possessed power over creation, life, and death. As man, he experienced hunger, thirst, fatigue, and pain, fully identifying with the human condition. This paradoxical coexistence is what allows Jesus to be the perfect mediator between God and humanity, understanding human weaknesses without being limited by them, and manifesting divine power in a way accessible to human understanding. The incarnation, the act of God becoming flesh, is the culminating point of this union, where the infinite meets the finite, the eternal with the temporal, and the divine with the human. The implications of this union are profound and reverberate throughout Christian theology. His anatomy, although human, was capable of enduring extreme suffering and at the same time being the vehicle for miracles that defied natural laws. Jesus' ability to heal, resurrect, and control the elements was not a biological anomaly, but a manifestation of his divine nature operating through his human body. His resistance was not only physical, but also spiritual, allowing him to face temptations and adversities without succumbing to sin, demonstrating unwavering moral and spiritual integrity. His feats, from healings to resurrection, are understood as manifestations of divine power operating through his human nature, validating his messianic identity and his redemptive purpose. This uniqueness distinguishes him from other spiritual figures in history. While many prophets and religious leaders were considered inspired by God or bearers of divine messages, Jesus is presented as God himself incarnate, a claim that places him in a unique category. The analysis of his physical and spiritual presence, therefore, reveals a complexity and depth that continue to inspire and challenge human understanding, pointing to a reality that transcends the limits of reason and earthly experience. The doctrine of the hypostatic union is not just an abstract theological concept, but the key to unraveling Could the greatness of Jesus Christ be explained only by humanity, or is there something even deeper and more divine behind each miracle? This is the central question that permeates the analysis of his anatomy, his feats, and his nature. We invite you to reflect on these questions, to deepen your own understanding, and to share your perspectives in the comments. Your journey of discovery continues, and each reflection contributes to a richer and more multifaceted understanding of the figure who for millennia continues to intrigue and inspire humanity, challenging us to look beyond the obvious and to consider the possibilities that transcend the merely earthly. May this exploration serve as a starting point for an ongoing dialogue and an incessant search for truth.